Welcome, Group Mac T, back again. And what powers your drive? And remember, when you go ahead and watch this video, go ahead and please hit the like button and join the group, because I do not have comments activated on my YouTube videos. So join Mac T Ford Edge, and of course then you can discuss videos, ask questions, and learn all about the ins and outs of maintenance on your Ford Edge through all the model years and trims. So that being said, a little bit of back history, as you saw, is draining the oil out, and that was, of course, the oil cocktail that I had made the previous video on, and that was a mixture of 6 different oils using a Perlator Boss filter for the filtration, and that was the Mobil 1 oil, the Kendall GT liquid titanium, and then the Valvoline oil, the Super Tech from Walmart, the Royal Purple, and then the Redline. All were a 5W20 synthetic oil that I ran for approximately 191 hours. So let's go ahead and review this oil report that I got back from Blackstone on January 16th, telling us how did this oil cocktail perform over 191 hours of use. I will qualify the 191 hours as approximately 10,000 miles of runtime for the Ford Edge 3.5 Duratec, which is what I drive in my Ford Edge. So first of all, we're going to start with the upper part of the report, and it does say it was a 5W20 oil. They did not say what type, because it was 6 different types, and of course the oil use interval was 191 hours. But as you see, they said they guessed the sample came from Lulubell because of the miles. Yes, they know me well, and of course I do a lot of oil sampling there, and with the mileage listed at 221,316 miles. That is what I have on it at that time. I'm now just about 224,000 miles. But as the oil change goes, it was very similar to all my other intervals, and of course the metals are compared to past trends and universal averages, and everything was nice, as they said in the report. The mixture of the oil brands gave a hodgepodge of additives present, including the moly and titanium, as well as sodium and others that were listed below in there. But overall, they said it was a nice report and engine. Lulubell's 3.5 is running great. So let's move on to the next part of it as far as what we got going on with our Ford Edge. And we start up here with the first report highlighted on the left in the red, and of course that was the cocktail and the numbers that of course accumulated on that. Then we move to the next part, which are the unit and location averages. These are the averages based on all of my oil changes that I've submitted. So if some of them don't match, it's because it's a hodgepodge of mixtures from other reports from my other Ford Edge included in this as a rule, but they did include just Lulubell in this report. So you will see those averages may not add up like you think, but that's because they're also included in Blueberry, my other 2011 Ford Edge. And then of course you see my other oil change in the highlighted red, and that is the Redline oil in my past run on that for 204 hours of run time, and that was the Redline racing oil. And we'll go over all these numbers as we progress. Let's see, 199 hours, and that was of course this one highlighted in red, and that is the Mobil 1 oil that I ran for that. And I've never added any oil to any of my oil changes, although I generally am about a quart low when I get to 10,000 miles, and that is mostly due, some people say, to the valve cover and the oil getting blown through into the intake. So we're going to leave it at that point. as the why it's a quart low, and I will be changing that valve cover when I get a chance. In the far right, we're going to see the universal averages, and that is what the oil is reported to across the board for all oil testing through Blackstone for the 3.5 Duratec. So those are the universal averages that Blackstone receives oil samples from. So this is a real good indication where you stand on your oil as far as the testing compared to everybody else accumulated, and it gives you a good idea, where is my engine going and what is going on with it. Is there any problems? Now, as you can see, we have highlighted in red the 191 hours that we of course ran this one on, and then of course you're going to have our first one top highlighted as we go down, and I'm talking about them, aluminum. Okay, this last one I was reading 7 on the aluminum, and you can see that it is slightly higher than my past 2 oil changes. And again, this is a high mileage engine, but again, nothing out of spec. If Blackstone feels it's out of specifications, they will of course highlight it in bold black numbers. So right now it's not far enough out of line for them to even consider giving me a warning about. But again, the numbers were pretty much comparable with the universal averages. I'm running 7, and of course my oil changes running 5, 6, and 7. The chromium of course was 0, so there's no issues there. And of course I will put one caveat on this. I will explain all these in my new oil series that I'm going to do. And I'll explain what all these metals and additives are, but I'm just going to go over what this report is saying that's in there, and we'll just leave it at that. But this way you can see what the oil cocktail did compared to the other oils. Now the iron, of course, definitely not above the universal averages, and pretty darn good as far as running. I was running 9 on this sample, and overall not much variance. It's 8, 9, and 10. So there's not enough variance to even be concerned about, and this oil cocktail did pretty good, still below the universal averages. The copper was quite low this time. It was only set at a 2, and believe it or not, the universal average for copper is 20. So my edge is running sweet, even though it's high mileage, and that has a lot to do with the frequency of your oil changes. Lead, universal average is 1. I have no lead in my engine coming out, so therefore there'd be no measurements on it. It's all 0 across the board. The tin was also a 0, and the universal average is 1. So absolutely no tin in the oil also as far as tested. The molybdenum, I didn't pronounce that right, but anyway, you get the drift. Read the word and you can do it. But I had 180 on this oil test, and of course the universal average is 60. So the moly was essentially higher, and that is an additive, and it's a friction reducer. So therefore, that oil combination with a couple of the other oils that had higher moly in them, of course, made for a better combination of additives, as you'll see as we go through. But it was definitely not higher than the red line. But I think what happened was the red line contributed to the 180 because it has so much moly B in it. Whereas the motor, the Mobil 1 only has 90. So this average was 180, which is twice the amount, just due to that. The nickel, I had one point I had with the red line, a little bit of nickel in it, but universal averages are 0. All other testing on my edge, including this cocktail, were 0. So we're doing good there. Manganese, across the board for all testing on this was 1, with the universal average being, 5. So we're doing good on that one too. Silver across the board and universal averages are 0. So this testing is of course proving out pretty good, as you can see. Titanium, A universal average of titanium is 3. As you can see, the Mobil 1 and the red line have no titanium in them. But the Kendall GT liquid titanium was 1 quart, and that added just enough to throw it up into the 20 category for titanium, which is also a friction reducing metal that of course helps with the operation of the engine. So we can contribute the Kendall to that 20 on there as far as the titanium goes. And let's see, we have the potassium, and the potassium, of course, there's a lot more potassium in the red line, and then of course the Mobil 1 and my mixture with the red line brought it back down to about 2, being there's nothing in there, and the red line was only 1 quart and there's not much in there, so it would stand to reason that it wouldn't be real high. Let's see, boron. Overall, the boron level was above the universal average, just slightly, not enough to make a big difference, but yet it was the highest amount in a combination of this cocktail than all other testing for all other oils I ran, such as the red line and the Mobil 1, and the universal average was also exceeded by having that 51, vice the universal of 45. The silicon. Silicon, of course, is an anti-foaming agent per se, and it came out to a 13. Mobil 1 has about 13 in it. Of course, red line has about 19 in it. Universal average is 15, and I came up with a combination of oils. Since I'm sure not all of them had it, it brought it down to a 13 on the average, so just slightly below the universal average. Sodium. The sodium was quite a bit lower on all these oils because they did not contain that much sodium, whereas the universal averages for a lot of people that use oils and submit documents for or testing samples apparently have a lot more sodium in their engine oils than what I choose to use. So ours was down to 17, which was, of course, the highest amount of sodium in there. So one of the oils did have more sodium in it to help bring that number up above, but definitely not equal to the universal average. Calcium, of course. Calcium's a good thing to have in your engine oil because it does help clean it. Again, 2,200 or 2,026 is the universal average, and if you notice, the Mobil 1 was at 1,355. And then, of course, the red line has a large amount of calcium in it to help clean things up. And then, of course, the combination of the oils that I used brought it down to 1,698. Again, fairly comparable overall with the universal averages and everything going, and nothing to worry about. But it's still a good number for a number of additives. Magnesium. Again, another additive that helps with your engine, and of course magnesium is present in most oils, as you can see. Mobil 1 does go for the gusto with the 626 for their magnesium they do have in the oil, and then of course the red line goes with 93. Of course they have other additives they utilize in lieu of that, and then of course our overall average was 304 for this oil cocktail, and that really of course brought it up higher than the universal average. So calcium is one of those, or magnesium is one of those additives that definitely oil companies use to help make sure their oils work good, and of course friction reducers, I believe, is what it is. Phosphorus, again, another cleaning agent, I believe, and of course 678 is the universal average. And as you can see, the oil cocktail was above that, and then of course we're running red line was 903, and the Mobil 1 was 642. Pretty much stands in line. They all have phosphorus in them, so it stands to reason why the numbers were pretty equal in the whole oil cocktail mix. Zinc. Zinc, everybody adds zinc. Zinc is like the universal additive to help make sure that your engine runs with friction reducers and everything else. It is probably the cheapest additive, and it is the most used additive. And the universal average is 781, And as you can see, Mobil 1 had 753, red line was 1018, and overall, when you combined them all together, being they probably all had that, and the red line probably boosted it, gave it a little bit of a boost, but we ended up with an 806 for the cocktail mix. So we go down to then the barium. Now the barium, of course, universal average is 2, but there's absolutely no barium in any of the oils that, of course, I ran in my Ford Edge Duratec. Now that being said, and you see in all of these oils reviewed, but basically we're concentrated on the cocktail to see what it compares like to other oils. You can see that this cocktail added extra additives by mixing things together, whereas you had across the scale more additives in the oil as a total unit compared to just buying one brand where they have their special mixtures for certain things and they leave out others. Notably the titanium was in there, and of course you had more Molly B than normal. So all these things added up in trying to make this oil maybe a better oil. It's for you to decide. I'm not telling you which one's the better one, Mobil 1, red line, or my oil cocktail. It looks like if you have oils around and they're all the synthetic and they're all the same weight, it doesn't hurt to mix them in the overall scheme of things as far as what we're doing here. Now going into our properties, of course to the left where it's highlighted in red are all the different properties that they do test. So we're going to start out first of all with our universal averages for these, and this is where we want to stick around. We don't, and some of these are the guidelines for testing. So we're going to start out first with the Mobil 1, and as you can see, it was spot on right there in the viscosity at 210 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's 53.8, and that's right within the specs. And then of course the viscosity for the Mobil 1 was 100 degrees Celsius. Basically it was right smack dab in the middle of there too, and the flash point was 415 degrees. Flash point can be affected by fuel, and in this case the fuel was a 0.5, which means that there's very little fuel in the oil. Antifreeze 0, that's a good thing. That means that water pump's still working. And of course water, it means there's no water in there either. And insolubles are any hard particles that get in, like if you drive down gravel roads, carbon that gets in there, dirt, dust, any garbage that gets sucked into the intake, into the engine, can eventually end up in the oil. And this also indicates how well your oil filter is working too. So again, good results on that. Now as far as the red line, again 56.7, it was within the parameters set by Blackstone, and again the viscosity at 100 degrees Celsius was on the high end of it, but it was still really good. The viscosity seems to be pretty good in that red line oil, and its flash point again was 410 with the fuel at 0.5. So everything going said, my engine's running good because it's a 0.5 all the way across the board, and that's a good thing. And let's see, the insolubles was slightly higher with the red line, but nothing again to worry about because it was definitely below the averages. Now the oil cocktail, here's what we're looking at. 53.7, definitely within the specs, right smack dab in the middle just about of what the universal average is for 210 degrees Fahrenheit. And then of course the viscosity at 100 degrees Celsius was 8.38, which is right smack dab in the middle there. So nothing to worry about. And then the flash point was lower, it's 395. So the various oils, some of them cause the flash point to go down overall about 15 degrees more than the red line, and 20 more than the Mobil 1. And then fuel is still the same across the board. And again, I had 0 water antifreeze in it, and I had a 0.3 in this for insolubles. Again, dust, dirt, garbage that could get sucked in through the engine or anything like that, or of course your carbons. But overall, this oil cocktail turned out to be a pretty darn good test. And for the miles that I drive and the hours that I drive, that is definitely a good test for this motor oil cocktail. And I will say that frequency is key. It doesn't matter what oil you run. I highly recommend the synthetics. It just gives you better protection and better cleaning of your engine. And that's the best thing about that. But this oil test definitely proved out that it doesn't matter what you put in it. As long as it's a synthetic and it's the same weight, it'll do the same job as any branded oil of one type. So feel free to try out what I did. You know, see what kind of results you get. But again, I have another oil cocktail coming up because I have a lot of oil testing I do for virgin samples, and I will be dumping a lot of different oils together again on my wife's edge, and this will be to test the oils under extreme severe conditions of short trips and high idle times. We're talking hours and hours and hours of idle time where we can reach 100 hours in as little as 2,000 miles. So, you know, the mom bus just sits there and idles waiting for the kids, and that will cause all sorts of undue stress on an engine when you do that type of stuff. But as I said, this is the oil sample some of you are waiting for as a result of this motor oil cocktail. Hope that you, of course, learned something that, hey, it doesn't matter what kind of oil it is as long as you got oil in it, right? But that is the results of the testing, folks. So I hope you found it educational, if not informative or entertaining. But this is Mac T, and of course, by all means, make sure you join up on that Facebook group. And of course, at the end of this video, I will put down, you know, my advertisement for my T-shirts that I, of course, am selling. I got stickers and everything else to help support this channel. But as with all things, I just want you to like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And of course, there's no comments activated, as I said in the beginning of the video. And of course, join Mac T Ford Edge there. And then of course, Mercy Girl's going to toss a couple of one-liners at you all so that you can follow along with that, and some great music from the band of One. And remember, my feet hit the floor today, and I'm having a great day. And I want you to have a great day too.
Thank you for watching Mac T's videos, and remember to like and subscribe. This is a Mercy Girl production.